What's the last year plus, and then more specifically since March when you took
Right.
over, what's that all been like for you?
Sure. I mean, first off, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. The last year has been a lot. There's been a lot going on, no shortage of lots of news and lots of changing, moving pieces in college athletics everywhere, I think. And so we've really been trying to focus on, what's within our control at Washington State and continuing to keep, a great student athlete experience and a great product for the fans and the alums and everybody. And so that's kind of been the focus over the last year for all of our staff, to be honest. And then since the last 8 weeks or so, I think it's just been a lot of getting up to speed on some things I wasn't as closely involved with, or also, some other folks taking over things I'd been more closely involved with, and just kind of assessing and figuring out what the next steps are for Washington State University athletics.
What's been maybe the most challenging part of this process, where it seemed like last summer things were happening at a rapid pace,
Right.
where you can't even catch your breath?
Right.
What's been the hardest part over the last year?
I think ultimately the uncertainty is probably what's been the hardest. I think we're wired as folks in college athletics to get a set of, circumstances, tackle it, move on. And the problem right now, or the challenge, is we just don't have all the variables. And so I think it's hard for all of us to wrap our arms around it and decide what the game plan is to really move forward. And so we're very solution-based people, I think, typically, just kind of the competitive nature maybe, I don't know what it is, but I think that's been honestly the most challenging part, is the uncertainty and not having all of the information yet you would want to be able to make good decisions going forward.
Given that, how would you describe the current state of WSU athletics?
I think the future is bright, and we're in a really great place. I think with all of the things happening in college athletics, the fact that we're in a position to be very flexible, to really evaluate all opportunities, all options. I think in a really interesting, unique way, Oregon State and Washington State may be just on the front end of what a lot of other universities are going to be going through. So I feel like right now we have the unique ability to be patient, to assess, but have the ultimate flexibility to really look at it as an opportunity.
And the biggest storyline, obviously, over the last year is the conference realignment and the situation that Washington State finds themselves in.
Right.
Where you're kind of in the pseudo Mountain West at this point, but also the WCC. It seems like Washington State, and you kind of hit it on the point there before, has been taking their time, been very patient in seeing where the landscape's going to change, especially when you look at the ACC, which could implode any day. We don't know. So is the patient part where it's like, all right, we're going to take our time and not rush into a conference?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you ask any of us right now, Washington State University is in the Pac-12 conference, and we have affiliate memberships in the WCC and the Mountain West for our sports to be able to continue accessing championship opportunities and competing at the highest level. And, a great opportunity to provide some, I think, stability and a chance for our student athlete experience to continue to be the amazing one that it's been, throughout time at Washington State. And so I think it's exciting. I really do. I just keep coming back to the fact that right now the patience will pay off, I think, relative to, putting ourselves in a great possible position for the short term these next 2 years, but then really keeping our eye on the period of time after that.
Within that conference realignment, you've seen it in college sports. The money's getting bigger, the greed is getting greater, So how does WSU plan to compete in that landscape when it comes to the money and the financials of things?
I think the most important thing, in my opinion, having been at Washington State for over 23 years now, is remembering who we are and staying true to what our priorities are. I think over time there have always been new shiny objects that have come up, or things that it would be easy to kind of get sucked into or get swept up by. And I think one thing that has always served Washington State well is really remembering who we are, what our priorities are, and then what all of the available tools or opportunities could do to enhance that. So I think that's going to be tremendously important, to just remember who we are, remember what our soul is at Washington State, and just figuring out what the best possible way to use all of the opportunities to our advantage.
Obviously, it seems like one of the opportunities that you could have in the next few years, depending on where the conference realignment landscape looks like, is to rebuild the Pac-12.
Sure.
How do you even go about starting a process like that? This is pretty unprecedented at this point.
Right. I think a lot of that work will be done from the center at the Pac-12 conference, no different than when the 10 expanded to the Pac-12, or a lot of different conference realignments generally. And so I think it's really finding institutions that are like-minded, perhaps geographically, similar, whatever the parameters may be that are important going forward, and then determining if that's the best option for the Pac-12 to rebuild, with Washington State and or Oregon State as, member schools. There are so many different possibilities, I feel like, but I think that'll be important, no different than what Washington State is doing, the Pac-12 will do as well, and determine what their priorities are and how possible, new member institutions could fit those.
Do you see a scenario where football just breaks off and is its own thing compared to the other sports?
Sure. I think anything's possible. As I've said to some of our staff in-house in athletics, I don't know that we know what all the possible paths are. So I think if you mention any possible scenario and then 20 others that may seem unfathomable, I think anything is a possibility at this point.
And then one of the bigger notes that dropped in the last couple of weeks is the ability for the universities to now directly pay the students. How have you been able to, it's still in its infancy at this point, how are you handling that?
Right. I mean, I think we'll need to decide what all of those variables are and collect more information about what does that actually look like. Are they opportunities or benefits to the student athletes? Is it eventually more of a pay situation? Is it name, image, likeness type pay? I mean, there's so many unknowns that we are frankly just waiting to get more information about and then to determine where Washington State lands in that.
Obviously, the rivalry between UW and WSU runs deep, and it's amazing that the Apple Cup's going to continue despite everything. What was your reaction when you heard the news that Pat's going across the state and going to UW?
Right. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I have to respect and appreciate that Pat makes a decision that's best for he and his family or what his professional priorities are. And at the end of the day, the fact won't change that the Cougars and the Huskies don't really have any lost love for each other. And so I think that's one of the reasons the Apple Cup rivalry needed to continue. As hard as it was for Washington leaving the Pac-12 or Pat leaving Washington State to go to Washington, the emotion that all of that evoked is exactly why that game needs to continue for the fans, for the players, for everybody, for the state of Washington. It's super important, I think. And so it's easy to let the emotion, I think, suck us in, but at the end of the day, we shouldn't penalize what is actually best, in spite of the emotion. So
the news earlier this afternoon, the time and the kickoff channel, or I guess
yes.
Streaming at this point for the Apple Cup was just released, so it's going to be on Peacock at 12:30. What's your initial reaction to that? And also, is the irony not lost that a lot of those schools that left the Pac-12 didn't want to be part of the streaming, package?
Yeah, I mean, I think every game that's on every platform, to be honest, is a good thing to expose the Washington State brand and to get Cougar athletics out there. So I don't, beyond the thought that wherever we're on is a good thing to be on, but I do think that this is just like college athletics, just the distribution of the content, I think, is such a moving, tumultuous thing also. So I do think, that we'll see more and more of that with high-profile games, and all of it is, something that college athletics needs to be open to.
How much are you going to be involved or have a voice in the search for the new president? And how important is it to bring somebody in there with a sports savvy, given how important the time is right now for
Sure.
WSU?
There'll be, as I'm sure a presidential advisory committee, and there's going to be a wide variety of areas represented from campus and the university system. So likely athletics will have some representation. I was actually on the president advisory committee the last time around when President Schultz was hired. And I think just as a different unit on campus, it's just athletics and the ability to be partners and to have a good, marketing arm for exposure for the university. I think it's important for someone coming in to recognize the value of that. And I think to, be knowledgeable in many aspects of higher education, quite frankly, one of which is college athletics right now. But I also feel like, the knowledge is terrific, but I think the understanding of the role we play is almost even more important.
With sort of this turnover that you're seeing at a lot of the key positions at the university, does it make it difficult maybe get started on new capital projects, or you sort of hit and pause on that? I know you have indoor practice facility opening up this fall. You have the Champion Student
Yes.
Center also opening up within the next year. Beyond that, do you see any bigger projects?
I think right now, kind of stabilizing where we're at financially and really evaluating, again, the conference situation. And I don't think that the transition really impacts that so much as just right now the timing is good with these really much needed projects coming to completion. The timing is good right now, I think, to really focus on the everything relative to the department. And I often tell people when you come to Washington State, I think even though the names and faces may change, the kind of the soul remains intact and is consistent. And so that the transition doesn't really concern me, and I think it's good timing relative to for athletics, the projects, just to take time to evaluate.
Given the uncertainty that you guys are kind of facing right now, navigating it day by day, everybody talks about keeping players, but keeping coaches is a challenge
Very
too.
important,
What's
yeah.
the biggest challenge that you, I guess, foresee wanting to keep that cohesive unit of athletic department coaches together?
Sure. I think right now, no different than the student athletes, the fit of the coaches that believe in Washington State University and believe in the long-term viability for success is really important. But coaches are very competitive people, student athletes very competitive people. So I think people need to be somewhere that they feel like they can continue to have a chance to succeed at the highest level. And so that's going to be very important. I think the stability, the consistency, to the degree we can keep those things intact. But at the end of the day, the people that we need in those head coaching roles are the ones that believe in Washington State and want to be here.
One of the big notes or moments for Washington State over the last year was winning that court case. And I think what came with that is now people sort of assumed that Oregon State and Washington State now control these hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Can you sort of explain how that money works? Because also when the NCAA tournament was happening, it's like, oh, every Pac-12 tournament team that gets a win, that's extra $2 million.
Right.
Can you explain how that money works, and is it go directly sort of into your pockets, or are you going to see that money years from now?
No, I think it's a combination. I mean, ultimately, the money will go into the Pac-12 at this point, and there will be, expenses to continue to, keep the conference up and running, to keep Pac-12 enterprises up and running relative to producing a lot of our live events and different things. And so ultimately, there is still a cost to be borne to continue to run the Pac-12 and Pac-12 enterprises. And then there is an amount of money to be able to access, which we'll look at relative to what our other revenue sources are, keeping the next 2 years of just this grace period kind of going financially. But at the end of the day, really much of it will still flow through the Pac-12 conference.
What's the biggest concern, I guess, you hear from those in the athletic department when you're trying to get feedback from everybody on kind of the current state of things?
I think, back to my comment earlier about the uncertainty, I think the fact that the people inside our department just want to feel believed in still, that they can still succeed at the highest level, that they're still, doing amazing things, that they're still part of something really special and really great. And I think it's hard when there's so much uncertainty and it's so easy to kind of get sucked into the muck of the negativity. I think it really wears on our staff because they always feel like they're justifying or defending or something that they already know, which is from a Washington State University experience, nothing has changed. I mean, the student athletes will still come and get a great experience. The fans will still come and get a great experience. Being a Coug still is being a Coug. It's not part of a conference or anything. It's much bigger. It's much bigger than that. And I think that's the biggest thing that weighs on our staff is just that feeling that people want to doubt and don't want to believe, and that hurts.
I guess, yeah, sort of piggybacking off on that note here, this upcoming season, I don't know what the general feeling of the fan base is, but you're going to be playing in the Mountain West Conference, or have a scheduling agreement there.
Right.
Obviously, the Pac-12 is not dead, right?
Sure.
First and foremost, I think that's sort of a misconception.
Sure,
when people
very much
talk
so.
about this. But what's sort of your message to the fan base? And some fans are like, well, tickets are, looking at these Apple Cup ticket prices, and they're at least $90, or why am I going to send my family out to Pullman for the weekend when what are we playing for? What's sort of your message to those fans that maybe are on the fence about investing in this upcoming season.
Right. I think we're playing for what we've always played for, which are championships, whether that be bowl championships, whether it be conference championships, NCAA championships. And I think one thing over time that, you know, can be somewhat frustrating is that we want people to come watch Washington State University play, which is the team that's on the field or the court or in the pool or whatever, regardless of who the opponent is. And so to really come and look at it as a great family experience, and, you know, the tickets at Lumen may be more expensive than our fans are used to paying, but some of those fans on the west side won't be traveling, so they're only paying for a cost of a ticket. Or the people that are, you know, in Pullman or traveling from the west side to Pullman for our home games, you know, it's a great experience and a great weekend, you know, to be on the Palouse and to watch great football, or to be, you know, in Bowler watching volleyball, or in Beasley with basketball, and on and on and on. I mean, it's, to me, you know, I would just encourage people to continue to come support what they love.